Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second of our series in 2018 of webinars. I'm Vipul, Sheth, and I'm delighted to welcome Matt Flanagan from BlueHub to talk about using technology to align your internal processes with technology to deliver more advisory work. So welcome, Matt, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Morning, Vipul. Thanks for the opportunity. Looking forward to it.
No, that's great. Okay, so I'll very quickly just a little bit about me, not a lot, and then a few house rules, and then we'll get straight into it. So in terms of myself, I'm Vipul Sheth. I'm a chartered accountant, chartered tax advisor, trained in a medium-sized firm, then went to EY and KPMG and set up AdvanceTrack. Believe it or not, back in 2003. So, but I'll say no more and move on, really. So, few house rules. The session is recorded. So for anyone who wants to come back and listen, we will be emailing out links shortly as to how you can access that. We've got a chat and Q&A. So please use that throughout the session. We'll try and answer as many questions as we can during the next sort of hour or so. But if we don't get to it, we'll give you details of both myself and Matt at the end as well. Or we'll get in touch with you separately if there's anything that's kind of a little bit more detailed. So without further ado, we'll get on with it. So okay, Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll ask you a little bit about BlueHub as well.
Okay, morning all. Thanks for joining us this morning. So my background actually is program and project management for more corporates. So Capgemini, EDS back in the late 90s, working on NHS, inland revenue type of system. So SA Online, POA Online, some of those are some of the projects I helped deliver back in the 2000s. So say back in 2000s feels like it's years ago, but it is actually now. So that's my background. And then 5 years ago, escaped more into the SME world, lost a bit of love with the corporate world and felt like a bit of a number. So so that's a bit about me. And over the last 18 months, 2 years, been helping firms more so on a personal note with their digital transformation. So really intrigued by the account space. And to be fair, when I started in IT and project management, I didn't really think I'd end up working so closely with accountants, but it's actually been pretty good fun. So
great. And just one thing, because it happened to me in a recent webinar, Matt, and I haven't warned you about this. Tell us something, or tell the audience something that you haven't really shared with anyone.
Tell the audience something that I haven't really shared with anyone. So up until about 4 years ago, I was heavily involved in semi-professional football, and I managed in the rounds of the FA Cup. So if you do some Googling on Matt Flanagan and Harry Redknapp, you'll find some very interesting topics. So that's something that no one would know.
Okay,
and I've got some stuff around here looking at me with a funny face as well.
Don't worry, I had a similar thing with Trent, but it also came in about football. But let's move on.
Okay, there you go. So yeah, I support Newcastle as well, but that's not a good thing to talk about. Anyway, onwards and upwards. Next part. So BlueHub, we're a business that helps primarily clients and end users with the apps in and around the cloud accounting ecosystem. So job management, e-commerce, inventory, and we've got a team of 12 here, and we've also got some software developers in that group as well, because way back we used to build cloud systems that linked with Sage Line 50, and we've slowly evolved into the cloud accounting world, especially more so over the last 3 years. So we're based in the Midlands. Team of 12. We work globally, which is pretty good, and we're still finding really good opportunities in this new world of cloud accounting. So looking forward for that growing essentially.
Great. Okay.
Brilliant. So let's just get So we're going to run through the agenda. We've done the intro, some common issues that we're seeing across firms. We're going to run through what the process is and what's the process that we see in terms of internally to the firms. What can we think about introducing tech to those processes? A bit about where your firm may be in the journey. We're going to run through some top tips and a bit of Q&A. And I think it's fair to say, Vipul, that we're going to keep this quite sort of conversational.
Absolutely.
Because obviously we've caught up at quite a few of the different exhibitions and different meetups that happen, and it's probably making some of those conversations a bit more public. So it's going to be very much not really just me talking. We're going to be having a conversational discussion all the way through this. Okay, so straight into the process map. So Vipul, this is where we've been looking at the processes that we see firms are carrying out internally. And I think we've got the onboarding element of a client. And I also feel onboarding now is onboarding existing clients to cloud. There's an onboarding of new clients and an onboarding of existing clients to cloud. There's a collection of the data from the client. There's the processing of the data. Really important point is the governance and the process check-in internally. And then obviously the process management, and then finally the business management. And is this, Vipul, we're seeing this as something standard that we're seeing firms implement more and more so now, aren't we?
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And I'm sure you see it as much as I do. The firms that really take the time to understand this part and actually document it, they are the most successful in generally serving their clients and actually moving away from firefighting to actually delivering great advice and service to their clients.
Yeah, and I think one of the golden rules of process is it needs to be repeatable, because if it's repeatable, we can scale it. If it's not repeatable, it's impossible to scale, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Okay, so some of the areas that you need to be thinking about, and if your internal process isn't that clear at the moment, then you need to make it clear. And that's the first step, because software will only magnify your process. So if your process is not great, the software will magnify that it's not great. If it's a good fundamental process, the software will magnify and improve and gain the efficiency that software will bring. Okay, so some of the internal challenges, and we've spoke about these many a time, Vipul. So one of the main issues that I see when I speak to firms is the business process has evolved over time, and it could have been individuals within the firm who have really evolved these processes, and actually they've just stuck. There might have been a very temporary process, but actually they've just become the actual process that firms use. Vipul, what's your view on that?
I think whenever we talk to firms, they need internal champions to actually take the time and almost go away from their day job for a period of time to understand what the business processes are. And it kind of comes to your point about the software magnifying the lack of process.
Yeah.
But by taking the time to understand it, because ultimately, most firms do have a process, even if they've not documented it very well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Everyone's working to something. I say, if it's not documented, there's just an understanding that this is how we work. That is a process. The fact it's documented or not is a different problem, but everyone has a process. It's just whether it's known and whether it's something that is repeatable and scalable.
Yeah, brilliant.
I think as well here, we've got the internal process not identified or defined. So that leads also into a very similar area. So there's no processes, or the internal processes are not clearly defined, which is another important part of that. And then other areas we have is staff not engaging with the tech options. And what we're seeing here is that this is because it's not being prescribed as a definitive process. So it's almost like we're going to offer this tool out to collect data from clients, and it's up to the individual whether they choose to use it or not. Whereas I think the firms that we're seeing excel in this area, they are giving the employees, the staff, the client managers criteria as to why this client fits this tech and this model of working. Are you seeing that, Vipul, more so?
Yeah, I mean, to take it into our world, we've seen our more successful firms where they've had internal champions.
Yeah.
and they bang the drum consistently rather than having one person. They maybe start with one person, but then they grow that team out, and then it then becomes a cultural thing that the firm engages in, whatever it is. And for us, the biggest thing that we see in our world, whether it's in the UK, Australia, or North America, it is adoption to cloud and the speed at which they're adopting it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the secondary part of that is there's no clear process for the tech adoption. And that does lead back into this champion. I mean, I think when we first started to get involved in this area 2-3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we were seeing that people were given this as a sort of a side role and a bit of homework to get the cloud adoption going. And I think the last 12 months, we've seen more of the cloud champion being given a specific role, which isn't necessarily fee earning, but is all about getting this running. But what I would say is that it's likely to grow from one person very quickly, and it needs to become a firm-wide aspect that needs to be considered. So I think definitely the cloud adoption in general, whether it's tech or in terms of the culture, it has to be given firm-wide. There may be someone driving that, but it needs to be much more wider than that, essentially.
No, that's great. That's what we see, and it'll be more successful as a consequence if everyone's there on the bus.
Yeah, absolutely. And there will be people who won't be on the bus, of course. We know that not everybody is going to go with you, whether it's staff or clients. There's going to be an element of understanding who will fit and who won't, internally and cloud and client-based. But if you're clear on what you're offering and how you're going to offer it, that's much easier to make those decisions, much more informed.
Yeah.
Okay. So the external processing challenges, not optimizing the apps available. So we see this quite a lot where we've gone into firms and sort of asked them to review and audit and health check their current tech. And we've seen things like the basics of bank feeds not being implemented, or not enough of their clients have adopted that functionality, or it might be elements of the invoice automation. Is there some rules and things that can be used? We're not seeing enough of that really. So people take the initial software, put the basic element in, and then don't go back and revisit it and start to bring it to life a bit more with the likes of bank rules, bank statements, bank feeds, those types of things. Is that what you've seen? And we've seen the firms that have really started to grasp this have ensured they've optimized what they've got. Have you seen that, Vipul?
Very much so. I mean, we see some firms who will still allow clients to not have bank feeds, or they may or may not adopt the OCR solution that the firm has used. And, without naming names, there are several out there, but they'll have 5 of their clients on, but they're doing bookkeeping for 25. And that really doesn't allow you to scale a bookkeeping service, for example, if you're letting clients make the decision.
Absolutely. So I talk about this as the tail wagging the dog. And I think a lot of firms have got into the position where the customer is driving their process. And actually, you need to take that control back, and your client needs to engage with your process and how you wish for it to work. And I think if you're going to try and cater for the hundreds or thousands of clients you've got and everything they want to do, then it's going to be impossible to get anything repeatable in. So you're going to have to be really strong on your own internal structure and process, but also really strong and set good expectations with your clients as to what the expectation of them is in order for you to service them in the best possible manner. So yeah, don't let the tail wag the dog is one of my key messages to you. I think as well, this alludes back to firms don't understand their client base well enough. So understanding your client base is so important now, because understanding at what point is going to be a good time to talk to them about cloud adoption. So for example, a conversion to cloud could just be like a Xero, a QBO, and a receipt bank auto entry, just those two. And it may be that you're going from Sage and it's a nice smooth move into this cloud world. You want to look at those because they're easy to move. And secondly, if they're a good client, you've got they're a simple and reasonable move, and they're a good client. We want to keep them, and you make sure you work with them. What we're seeing at the moment is firms are really just reacting in terms of taking clients across the cloud, especially existing clients. and then may not necessarily be selecting quite correctly. I mean, I've got a client segmentation sheet, which I'll send the link to Vipul so he can put it onto the follow-up email after with the recording. But you should really start to really segment your client base as to who you want to keep, who you really want to keep, and those, well, actually, they're not really fitting our new way of working, and maybe they're not people we're going to waste too much time on trying to convince that this is the right way to work. Because I think firms are getting burnt by horror stories and bad experiences converting.
I think the other thing also is, and for the benefit, but it's a general principle in the UK. A big thing's happening, which is about moving business to digital, tax reporting. But the principle's the same throughout the world and this webinar is really about how you can serve your clients better. And part of that is about giving them the cloud tools that allow us as advisors to deliver a better client experience. In terms of when firms should be doing this, would it be sensible that the last set of accounts that the firms now do, that they use that as an opportunity to have a conversation, Matt? What are you finding across the firms you're working with?
Yeah, well, there's got to be like a nurture program in place. So what you should be doing is looking at your client base, your year ends, and saying, right, when are we going to next can speak to them? And we need to talk to them about, let's MTD UK wide, but transformation to cloud, the transition to cloud for them. And you should be setting the expectation that we need to speak to you in the next 6 months about doing this. So it's almost setting the scene that you're going to be talking to them in the future about moving this. So if we were talking at the end of March, we'd be saying, right, I need to speak to you, Vipul, about a move into the cloud, make sure you're compliant with MTD and get all the benefits of cloud, etc. Why don't we get together in June and run through this so we can get a real plan together and make sure you're going to be positioned and set the plan up. I think where firms are maybe thinking it can be a one hit of, we'll just talk to Vipul today and we'll get a cloud conversation going, but you could be nurturing via marketing or email or dropping it into your conversations that you're having with the client. But it's all about setting expectations that you are going to be talking to them in the near future about converting across to cloud ways of working.
Great. No, that's great. And in terms of timescales, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about your segmentation tool. In terms of the length of time, and I don't want to steal your thunder, what's the longest time that you've seen when you've done the calculations that some firms are likely to take to go to cloud?
Yeah, okay. So I've got a calculator, and again, I can run people through this on an individual basis, but I've got a calculator which basically looks at your current run rate of moving to cloud, and then with the amount of clients you've got to move, how long it will take you. So I've actually seen, the worst case I've seen is 78 years. And I see on average at the moment for the firms who are maybe have signed up to a vendor but haven't really got the traction, it's around about 7 to 8 years. So literally at the moment, I've seen some really bad ones, 78 years, 44 years. You do need to understand that how quick you need to go in order to be where you want to be. And obviously for a lot of firms, that's sort of 4 or 5 times more efficient than they are now.
Yeah. No, that's really useful, and that's why I really want to, especially with the speed at which, certainly here, but across the world, the move to digital is going. So, yeah, very important. Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. And then one other area that we see is and I don't think the vendor's been great at this, if I'm honest. And what I mean by this is that I think firms that are excelling are selling their platform, not the individual softwares. So they're not good. So I think where I've seen major problems is there'll be a lot of firms who've got a lot of clients on Xero or QBO or whatever their cloud accounting choice is, and then they're going back for a secondary phase to go and talk to them about, maybe Receipt Bank or Auto Entry or data billing, those types of systems. And my feeling is that they are like salt and pepper. They should go together. So you should actually be going out and selling, this is our platform. This is how it works. This is how we collect data off you. This is how we process data. And because we can do all this, we can now output data and actually give you information based on your real-time data, or as real-time as we can get it, much more real-time than a manual process. So I think firms are selling individual softwares. They're not selling their platform, and need to understand their platform first and foremost.
Matt, do you think this is because historically firms helped businesses adopt software, desktop software and the like, and kind of left them to it, to their own devices, whereas now it's there's the opportunity to be more interactive because we have access to the same data?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's historic and just an understanding of what firms I think need to do in order to really package up what they're offering, and it's going to be more than a cloud accounting system, in my view.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
So in a process map, just very high level, we've got the first step of collecting data. So some practical tips here really around collecting data. What you should be looking at is what are the different methods that you currently collect data. So if you collect them manually, you accept the bag and box, you've got some which are on receipt bank or auto entry or something like that. You should take a view on all the different ways you collect data currently, and then put next to that how many of each of those types of collections you've got. So if you've got a very high manual sort of collection process, you start to track those numbers against each of those different ways of collecting the data, and that gives you a current benchmark of how you're collecting data. Even if you made it a ratio of, we do 50% manual, we've got 20% on automated, which might be receipt bank, and then there's a hybrid of other ways of we collect data, whatever that might be. But what you want to do is you want to collect that data today and understand how we currently collect data from clients, because that will give you an idea of how much you've got to streamline. And then also what it also starts to do is give you figures on how you're collecting that data in that way, and see improvements of how you're starting to move people from manual ways into automated ways. Again, the same for processing data. How do you currently process data internally? What are the different methods? And then tracking the numbers against those different methods. Because again, you want to be seeing improvement month on month. These are KPIs that you should be considering to be reviewed to ensure that you are internally improving and engaging with automated and cloud ways of working. And then finally, advising on the data. How do you currently advise? Are you doing things on Excel? Are you doing things out of the cloud accounting platform? Have you got one of the advanced reporting tools in place? How do you do that? And again, collecting the stats against each of those methods of advice. How do you do that? And then that will give you an idea of how you're currently working in each of these three core areas, because then you've got some benchmarking to work from and some KPIs to start to report on.
And just a question there, Matt, in terms of the firms that you've seen that have adopted it the best, what sort of percentages are, yes, there'll be some that are pure cloud firms, but if we think of firms that have been in existence pre-cloud and have gone to cloud, what's the highest ratio that you've seen that firms have been able to go to? Because there's a mixture of people kind of in our on our webinar today.
Yeah, so I think, so there's two types of firms for me. There's a conversion firm, which has a number of clients on different ways, desktop or manual ways of working. We see quite a low adoption rate and a slow adoption rate in those. So it can be as low as sort of 20-25% of their clients are actually on their way to cloud. Whereas the firms which don't have, I would say, the baggage of conversion and transition and are currently basically saying that we'll work with clients in this way and are taking all as a new client and not necessarily converting clients, there's a much higher adoption. So it's up in the 80s and 90s and like you say, 100% cloud.
Okay.
One of the areas I would be mindful of is one, we talked about the processing data, which is getting people onto Xero and QBO. We see, let's say there's 100 of those. Your next stat is how many are you automating the collection of data? Because that number should be high. It should be like for every 100, we've got 80 who are collecting data in an automated fashion. But in the conversion firms, that'll be as low as 15, 20%. So obviously we're not collecting data in a uniform manner. And we're not realizing the efficiencies of tech. And then on the final flip side of that is, of all of these, of the 100 cloud clients you've got, how many of you are advising on those clients using cloud data? Because again, is that number low for the 100? Are you just doing 5 to 10 of those in an advisory fashion? And how do you start to increase that? So there's some really key KPIs from your adoption, and that's what firms should be tracking on a monthly basis.
Brilliant.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Hopefully the audience found that useful. So
good. Okay. So let's bring this to life a little bit. So we talk about collecting data, processing data, advising on the data. So we've got the collecting data. You've got tools like Data Molino, Auto Entry Receipt Bank, widely known. There are others, but these are three that have been here, veterans of probably 3 or 4 years in the UK. We're then seeing more of the process data. We've got Xero, QBO, sort of the lead in, and then Sage 1, which is coming more to the fore. And then you're advising on the data. I'll be mindful of this, and I know probably the reporting add-ons won't like me saying this, but I think your first start for advising on the data is to really use the QBO and Xero reports to their maximum first and foremost. Maybe just get your collection data and your process data as your initial platform, and then when you've exhausted the reporting that you can use on the Xero and the QBOs, you can go to the future leads and the spotlights and the floats and the fluid leads and all these types of things which are starting to come to life now, with a really specific requirement of what you want them to do. Because at the moment, I think firms are signing up to this, all three, they've hardly got any real-time data running through, and then they're expecting, we've got to use Futurely or Spotlight because we've signed up to it. But you need to step into that in something that's realistic and in the proper time frame. So I'd personally be spending my time as a firm ensuring that I've got the collect data and the process data element of the platform right first and foremost, because once we've got real-time data, whatever you want to advise on, advisory becomes real because you've got the data in play.
Okay, and so in that, would you be saying that really how you deliver the bookkeeping is absolutely fundamental to then delivering the advice? Absolutely.
Without data, how can you advise? You're no better off than you are currently if you're collecting it manually, and it's a longer process. Advisory, one of the fundamentals is we need data, and we need it in a much more up-to-date fashion than we're currently getting it.
Okay, fantastic. Great, thank you.
Okay. So in terms of ourselves, we help firms select, adopt, optimize internal platform. Client segmentation, visualization is really important. So once you understand your client base, and I think one of the areas we've definitely seen a problem with in the profession is the data discipline, the data quality in terms of what they know about their clients is very, very poor. And I'm talking in general. So if you've got a really good set of client records, I apologize, but the majority that I've seen haven't been that good at all. And I think without understanding your client base, it's very hard to form a plan of how you're going to get them to adopt cloud, or how you're going to start to nurture them into cloud ways of working. We also help businesses with the client apps and add-ons, job management, e-commerce, inventory, and we do help firms with app selection assistance for clients, but not all the 650. It's for an amount, because I think firms are trying to wondering if they need to master all 650, and I would say I would master your internal practice efficiency apps first, and then worry about your clients' needs after that.
Yeah, okay. No, I think that's really good. I was at a children's party at the weekend and ended up talking to one of the fathers who was showing me Leap and Xero, because he was using one to run his sushi shop and the other one because he's a lawyer. So it's amazing what tools are out there to run diverse businesses, but both were using the same accounting platform.
Yeah. Yeah, and as well, I mean, I think what we're seeing with the apps is it's a reactive from a firm's perspective. The client, again, the tail is wagging the dog, because the client, the firm is getting a reactive phone call from a client, and then they think they need to know about that particular add-on. So if you've got a manufacturer's rang you, have you got one manufacturer or 40 manufacturers? Because if you've got 40, it's worth investing time. If you've got one, find a partner and pass it on. So that's where the client segmentation comes to life in terms of the operational add-ons. But that's for another day.
Indeed. But I mean, if there was a toolkit of apps that, you know, if you had to kind of have like a top 5 or a top 10, is there a list which I'm not saying you share it here, but you'd be happy to sort of share with the delegates?
Yeah, we can certainly, if people are interested in that, just please contact me. We've got some areas where we can see the top apps in certain type of sectors or verticals. So yeah, happy to put something together for that.
That's brilliant. That's great. Thank you very much.
Okie doke. So some areas you need to think about here is in terms of just understanding where you're at as a firm. So this is a 0 to 6 leveling that we put together. We've had it in a few different guises. This is one of the guises, but just to understand and think where you're at the moment. So we've got level 0 firms which are not considering cloud, and there are still a lot of firms who are not considering cloud. I'm still staggered by how many. We've got level 1, which is a will to use the cloud system. So they've probably signed up with a vendor, maybe signed up with a invoice automation and a receipt bank, but they're not really hitting the numbers. It's almost they're dipping their toe in the water, not really committed, and almost just being an organic growth type of firm. When a client asks about it, we'll go into it rather than a drive to take clients across to it. The level 2 is where we're seeing the partial horizontal. And when we talk about horizontal, I'm talking about your platform. So a horizontal for me would be your cloud accounting piece, your invoice automation, and then your reporting suite. That's your horizontal. So the partial horizontal is your receipt bank and Xero, those two together, or QBO and auto entry, whatever your tools are. You've got those in place. You've got some numbers on there, and we see a lot of firms stagnate at level 2 because they get the movement, and then they get the low-hanging fruit internally, and then they stop. There's no plan in place on how they're going to take more clients across. Have you come across that, Vipul?
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that as being a really limiting factor for the firms to move to, you know, on your other slides about moving to the advisory piece, that they're no better off than if they'd never had access to the data.
Yep. Absolutely. And that partial horizontal, they're normally never given advisory based on the cloud clients they've got. So they're not even realizing, because all of this is about giving advisory, advice is such a general term, but essentially however you want to advise and whatever you want to advise on, you do need data in a more up-to-date manner. So that's got to be the driver. So that's the one part, level 2. And we see a lot of firms stagnate at level 2. And then we see level 3, where we've got horizontal in place and they've actually hit some traction, and they've actually got a plan of action of who they're going to approach, how they're going to approach, and a delivery plan in place. In all honesty, for the MTD, and if you really want to scale your digital conversion for clients, then this is the level you need to be at. So it's getting your horizontal in place, your platforms in place, and you've got an onboarding conversion workflow in place that people are following, because that's where you start to get the traction. We talk about being repeatable and scalable. And then level 4, 5, and 6 are when you start to get into different verticals. So you've got a specialism in certain sectors, certain industries, and you start to master the apps which sit on top of your horizontal platform. So those are where level 4, 5, and 6. We see a few firms in level 4, 5, not 6 yet, but I think where we're seeing level 4s and 5s are a lot of the firms who don't have the clients to convert. Whereas the conversion firms are in level 2 and 3.
And do you see a particular type of service or type of person within those firms?
Yeah, so what we're starting to see actually is, so what happens is the cloud champion gets given the role around about level 1. And then between level 1 and level 2, they start to, we find if it's a singular person, they start to get swamped. So they get swamped with the strategy, they get swamped with the individual conversion problems they're having, and then it really plateaus. So with the firms in level 3, we're seeing that there's much more of a team ethic to the delivery, and it's less onus on one person. It's more onus on the firm and a group of people to ensure this is going to happen. So that champion becomes champions.
Great.
Is that correct what you see?
It very much so. In whether it's you adopting our service, which is outsourcing, or cloud, we see a lot of similarity in the success of that, where it's a group of people who take charge of it, and where it's one person, there's a world of difference.
Yeah, and if it's one person who's not full time, you know, that that isn't really going to gain any traction. They'll get the basics done, but it's just unfair that that person will be able to really drive that delivery through.
So do you see that the person who is given the role often having a reduced client portfolio if they're at a technical level?
Yeah, that's normally reduced, and I prefer like no fee earning, because this is important. If you want to keep clients who are important to you, it should be given enough onus to really ensure that we've got some people who are honest. So one of the firms that I've seen really grow, they've got the client manager almost hands it off to a cloud conversion team. And that team was 2 people originally. It's now 11.
Yes.
So actually, and none of those people are fee earning. They don't have to book to a client, because they do charge for the conversions. They charge for the training, and then once it's gone through their client conversion team, it gets handed back to the client manager as a piece of as a ready for advisory client.
Okay, great. And those firms that have moved to advisory, have they? I assume. I mean, I'm assuming these things. I assume they're able to charge significantly higher fees as a consequence of having moved them to cloud and demonstrating with live data.
Yeah, and also as well, there's definitely a chance with some firms who really value it and maybe haven't even been offered it before. So there's there's new fees for some clients, but also I think that we're seeing certainly in year 2 of moving to this, that firms can charge the same, but actually the cost to serve is a lot less.
Yeah.
So actually it becomes just a front end meeting, and the processing is done elsewhere.
Yes.
So essentially, yeah, there's also better margins. There is better fees, but there's also better margins on existing fees.
No, absolutely. And we see it. I mean, you know, I know this is not about us, but we see a lot of firms using bookkeeping to then deliver the advisory.
Yep.
And, you know, but that can only happen, as you say, if all the ducks are in a row, that the data capture is there and they're on cloud. So
absolutely.
Brilliant.
Absolutely. So, okay. So finally, just some top tips. So we talked about mapping the current process and thinking about those, tracking how you currently process the numbers against the different ways you process internally. Once you know what the process is, you should be identifying the software in your platform to fulfill your requirements. I mean, there's some pretty clear leaders in that space, so it's not going to be to market of 10s or 20 different systems. You should be narrowing it down to sort of 2 or 3 offerings, really. Tracking the client numbers, adopting tech-based processes. You should be reviewing your client base and form a plan for transitioning clients to tech-based processing. Key point there, not every client is fit for tech-based process, but it should be a high percentage. Educate the clients and prospects on your platform, not just the individual software product. And finally, the most important part, if you're going to commit to this as a firm, do it properly, don't do it piecemeal.
And I know we've talked about your segmentation tool. You're happy for us to share that with the delegates?
Yeah, I'll give you, what I'll do is I'll send a demonstration of how that works.
Excellent. Brilliant. That's great. Okay.
Okay, so any questions?
Questions. Have we got any sort of questions that I know I've tried to ask you a few, so hopefully I've covered off most of it. But in terms of MTD, whilst I'm waiting for some questions from the audience, so please do send them in. In terms of MTD, it's just over a year away.
Yep.
If there's a firm, and I know it looks daunting when you look at it, and let's say there's 1,200 clients,
yep,
and there's a year to go, what is it that, and there'll be firms that are using desktop software, and they're relatively easy to move to cloud because there are tools like Move My Books, etc. there.
Absolutely, yeah.
In terms of sort of moving spreadsheet type clients, and it's going to be a cultural thing, and it's going to be a price-driven thing, perhaps, for some of those clients.
Yeah.
How easy is it for the firm to then actually say to them, look, you can't use your Excel, which doesn't cost you anything anymore. You really need to move to a Xero or a QuickBooks solution, which will cost you more, but will be able to deliver your accounts quicker. We'll let you know your tax bill sooner. And actually, when MTD comes, we wouldn't otherwise be able to submit your quarterly returns.
Yeah, so for me, again, it's about the platform, your service that you're delivering. If you're going to talk about things about, replace your spreadsheet with this piece of software, it's all about what service you're going to offer at the end point rather than a one-for-one. We're going to swap this Excel, 1997 version, and now you need to go onto cloud. I think it's really determining your offering. And I think the other thing is at this point is not every client will value the move. And you've got to work out whether you want to keep those clients or whether you just want to let them wilt away. But you should be looking at how many of those clients maybe aren't going to fit your new way of working or value your new service levels, because there are other clients out there who will.
Yeah.
So I'd be mindful, don't try and take everybody, and make sure that you cherry pick the good clients that are easy to move, that you want to keep and be sticky for a few more years, and don't go to the ones who are going to drain your energy and your love for moving to cloud.
Yeah, and in that, presumably, part of that's going to maybe pricing the service differently for those that adopt cloud.
Yep.
Those that choose not to do so.
Yep. Yeah, and as well, we currently charge you this on a yearly, and if you go into monthly, it'll actually be this is how this is what you'll get. You used to get this for your lump sum once a year, but on a monthly, this is what you're going to get, and there's 5-6 more things that you get for that. But again, it's up to whether the client will actually value that. But there's definitely how you message that to the client base has to be very clear and very well thought through.
Okay, great. And just a question coming in about the HMRC. I've not seen anything yet, but I don't know if you've sort of heard anything about what HMRC is planning to do in terms of communicating about VAT, MTD. I haven't heard of Hector reappearing on our screens.
So I think I'm expecting the TV adverts. I haven't heard anything officially. I went to an ICAW cloud conference last week, and the tax lead spoke about that. It's definitely happening. There's nothing being told to them that anything is going to change from that. But I think in terms, what I'm finding interesting is some of the. So I'm on a innovation park, and there's about 40 firms here, 40 businesses, and most of those have actually heard about making tax digital from the likes of the Federation of Small Business and the local chambers of commerce. So, or if you're not talking to your clients about MTD because you're not sure, other avenues are talking to them already. So I would be certainly sending some sort of communication out saying you will ensure they're MTD compliant, and you'll be taking them through the process to preempt that. I think if we wait for HMRC, who knows when that would be.
No. Well, interestingly, I saw a statistic last week at an event where, and this will shock the people listening today, 18% of accountants didn't know MTD was happening. So, which is remarkable, and actually 1 in 4 businesses didn't. So there is a large number of people out there who really don't even know it exists, let alone dealing with it. So,
but that's an opportunity for those firms that are going to embrace it and use it as one of the vehicles as why that people need to move to cloud. That's the opportunity. People aren't moving on this quick enough. Some people are burying their heads in the sand. Other people, as we say, are sort of dipping their toe in the water with a few vendors, but not really making a drive to make it happen. So they're converting your clients essentially is one avenue of movement, but also converting other people's clients and having new clients which fit your new demographic and service level a lot better is the opportunity. Absolutely.
And we're helping dozens of firms do that at the moment as well. So, but no, brilliant. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So, right. Well, thank you very much, Matt, and the audience have stayed with us throughout. So, so I think we must have managed to do something that has engaged people to stay for the whole 45 minutes or so.
Yeah.
We're going to, every month, we're going to be running a webinar with an expert like Matt in their chosen space. So if you're all happy to do so, but otherwise, please come and check our events page on the AdvanceTrack.com website, and we'll let you know about next month's event, which will come out to you shortly. Thank you, Matt, again, and I know the audience will really appreciate it. Just to end a little bit about us, if you've not already heard about us, we do compliance outsourcing, and we'd be really happy to talk to anybody about both our bookkeeping service and others, and helping firms to convert. But thank you again. The recording will be sent out to you as well shortly. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Right.
Cheers, Vipul.
Thanks again. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.